Before this is over, I'll show you the true power of chaos control!
Shadow the Hedgehog, the ultimate life form, redemption personified, hope of the people, edgelord. Shadow has had, let's just say, a complex existence within the Sonic universe. And let's be real here, complex is just a fancy word for inconsistent in this case. When we were first introduced to Shadow the Hedgehog in Sonic Adventure 2, I couldn't get over the overwhelmingly positive reception he received, with most of my friends and relatives who were still into Sonic all quickly jumping ship when it came to their favorite characters. Really to the point where I actually felt bad for Sonic, who I felt also had a fantastic performance in that game. Hell, pretty much every character was on their A game here, but still none could hold a candle to this diamond in the rough. And for the longest time, the only words you ever heard out of anyone's mouth when chatting to them about this game was Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow kind of represented a turning point in the Sonic series. The moment where it wanted to make it clear to the world that it could be far more than just a mascot platformer with a story aimed exclusively at children. Sure, there were dark elements in past games too, but Sonic Adventure 2 touched on far more of these themes than any of the games that came before, with a story that aimed to achieve a far greater emotional response from the audience. And it would be Shadow who would bear the weight of this darker, more mature narrative. Back then, it was hard to see, scratch that, it was impossible to see how Shadow could have been anything but a total success going forward. An all but assured win for the series. An ace up its sleeve. And for a while, this was most definitely the case. But with all his successes continuously marred by the myriad of other blunders in the series, Shadow's time in the limelight, as well as the best depictions of his character, would be all too short-lived. But while Shadow has spent far more of his time in the series as a redundant, soulless, or just flat-out terrible character, he will still always be one of my favorites. And in this video, I'll try to explain why that is, and how he's still one of the most important things to ever come out of the Sonic universe. So, strap yourself in, and let's discuss the limitless potential of Shadow the Hedgehog. As always, don't forget to drop a like on the video if you find yourself enjoying it, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. All those annoying YouTube metrics are unfortunately really important for the channel. So a huge thank you to everyone who takes the time to engage with them, and to everyone who watches my content. You guys are awesome, and all the support is very much appreciated. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Even as far back as 2001, evil doppelgangers weren't exactly a new concept in Sonic games. Eggman had already been creating them for what, like 6 billion years at that stage? Upping the ante each time, but always coming up short in the end against the real deal. And while it would be Eggman to set another one loose upon the world once again, this Sonic clone very much has a mind of his own, only really concerned with his own agenda. A lot of the marketing behind Adventure 2, as well as a lot of the game's early sequences on the hero side, were presented in such a way as to put a certain notion in our heads. A mysterious, sinister-looking dark hedgehog filling Sonic's role for the bad guys? We could all be forgiven for thinking that this might just be an organic version of Metal Sonic we're dealing with. Shadow has a simple yet striking design, with red striped markings contrasting against his black fur. A large tuft of white chest fur, maybe indicating age or a level of maturity. What's that? Silver has chest fur and he's young and immature? This guy wasn't even a twinkle in the eyes of Miyakawa or Nakamura yet, so don't sass me on this. Large golden rings on the cuffs of his shoes and gloves, and swanky jet-propelled air shoes that allow him to hover and run at remarkable speeds. Shadow's design is simple and clean, with the red, black and yellow all coming together nicely with a severe and slightly angular design, at least compared to Sonic's curviness at the time. And despite always being depicted frowning, and all the differences in appearance I listed above, as only the second male hedgehog in the series, he inevitably still reminds you of Sonic. And that was the idea here. Everything about Shadow and how the game portrays him early on is carefully constructed to make you discount him as just an evil Sonic, with all the shallow reasoning and motivations that go along with it. But this is the mother of all red herrings, and there is much more to Shadow than first impressions might suggest. Despite being cryogenically frozen for 50 years, the quick-thinking Hedgehog manages pulling the old genie in a bottle trick on Eggman, offering to grant him one wish in exchange for freeing him. Right away, we see that Shadow is highly intelligent and an excellent judge of character, immediately able to identify Eggman's greed and lust for power, and manipulate him accordingly, roping him into some vague master plan, without saying anything more than bring more Chaos Emeralds and meet him on the space colony. He managed completely turning their dynamic on its head, offering to grant Eggman a wish, only to end up making demands of him instead. That's pretty impressive. We've seen in the past just how manipulative Eggman can be, back when he tricked Knuckles into fighting Sonic. Yet here we have a brand new character running psychological rings around him, and this only helps to make clear just how intelligent Shadow is, with the cold, calculated, and somewhat regal tones of David Humphrey adding to this even further. He clearly has ulterior motives for helping Eggman, but blinded by the prospect of power, Eggman has been completely fooled. We learn early on what Shadow's true motivations are, as we see him haunted by visions of his past as he flees from Gun with a stolen Chaos Emerald, bombarded with flashes of the death of his closest friend Maria. Nightmarish memories rapid firing in his head like tiny explosions, until he's once again entirely consumed by that horrifying moment. Maria, the granddaughter of Shadow's creator, Gerald Robotnik, was gunned down before his eyes during a government raid on the space colony Ark 50 years ago. She was his one true friend, his ray of light in what otherwise was a lonely and confusing existence aboard the space station. And while a lot of his memories seem muddled, Shadow remembers one thing very clearly: his promise to Maria during her final moments that he would avenge her death at the hands of humanity. That was all that mattered now, and very quickly the audience perception of his character begins to shift. There's a reason he's doing this. Shadow's first encounter with Sonic is fantastic too. Everything from the way it's shot, to what was said, to the outcome of the scene. Similar to when he first met Knuckles, Sonic is on the back foot against this new foe, and even though he's pissed that Shadow has now got him caught up in this mess, he can't reach him to do anything about it. From Shadow's perspective, in his mind, he is the ultimate life form, a being unsurpassed by any other, and the whole scene is shot with this in mind. Shadow is above Sonic in every shot, looking down on him from atop the robot, then the building, then using chaos control to disappear, leaving Sonic to be arrested by Gun. There's a reason this scene is so popular. It's well shot, well written, and did a fantastic job establishing Shadow as both a physical and mental threat. When he reveals the Eclipse Cannon to Eggman, a huge planet-destroying laser weapon attached to the space colony, he explains that all 7 Chaos Emeralds are required in order to bring it to full power, with the final hook for Eggman being these carefully chosen words:
"The world could be yours."
Really hammering it home that while Eggman believes he is the leader of their group, with Rouge now recruited as well, it's always Shadow pulling the strings, manipulating events at every turn. And as this pseudo-team sets out to gather the remaining emeralds, he's at pains to keep up this pretense, coming across as outwardly bad and focused on his goal, when in reality, on the inside, he's a tortured mess, fighting back visions of his best friend's murder, as he tries to focus on the revenge he believes she wants. So far, there really hasn't been much opportunity to see Shadow's real personality. Sure, we know he's incredibly intelligent, ruthlessly manipulative, and laser-focused on fulfilling his promise to Maria, even if it means putting a planet-destroying weapon in the hands of a power-hungry madman. But as the story goes on, we start to see cracks appear in his facade. Unable to leave Rouge to die in the explosion, when she becomes trapped in the vault with the Chaos Emeralds, he rushes to her rescue, saving her just before the bombs he set earlier go off. Experiencing flashes of Maria's death as he imagines Rouge left to her fate, he clearly draws parallels in his mind between these two situations, and couldn't live with himself if he failed Rouge in the way he feels he failed Maria. People who don't care don't project their feelings like this, and Shadow's more compassionate nature is now beginning to creep out. Yeah, he tries to dismiss it all later, saying how he only went back for the emeralds, but like the audience, Rouge doesn't buy this for a minute. Bit of a side tangent, but I love how Sonic X's take on this. Not only has Shadow happy to just leave Chris for dead, I mean, who could blame him? but also bends over backwards to tell you that nobody died in this explosion.
Fortunately, the team now reports that everyone made it off the island safely.
People most certainly died here. This guy was friggin' toast. And there's no way the rest of the island was evacuated in time or was fully automated besides this one guy. But it never fails to give me a good laugh when companies try to make mass murder PG. So wholesome. Learning Sonic somehow survived the escape pod explosion and is now on his way to destroy the cannon, Shadow sets out for one final encounter with his blue rival. While his relationship with Sonic began as hated enemies, progressing to an acknowledgement of each other's powers, it has now reached a point where you can see they have a mutual respect for each other. It always seemed to me like Sonic ended up growing on Shadow, the determination of this blue hedgehog going from annoying to endearing, awakening within him his competitive side. Shadow might even see some of himself in Sonic, a part of him from when he was happy, when he had someone he cared about and who cared about him. And I say this because the conversation between the two here is vastly different than any of their interactions before. Sonic and Shadow are two sides of the same coin. The logo looks that way for a reason. Different in temperament? Sure. But similar in values, skill, and determination. At this point in the game, that arc for Shadow has almost come full circle. Sonic manages beating him in their race to the cannon, destroying it with the fake emerald. Which really begs the question, was Shadow's heart really in it? Or was it because Shadow knew his real plan had already succeeded? When the last emerald is placed into the Ark's console, Shadow's true intentions become clear to everyone. It was never about powering the cannon to take over the world. That was merely a ploy to get Eggman on board. Shadow's endgame has always been activating Gerald Robotnik's doomsday scenario. After learning his granddaughter had been gunned down in cold blood while escaping with Shadow, overcome by grief and rage, Gerald set in motion his master plan to destroy all of humanity. A humanity that had taken everything from him. And to make his self-administered justice all the more poetic, the very thing he created for the benefit of mankind, he would now use to destroy it. He altered Shadow's memories of his promise to Maria, and rigged the Ark to collide with Earth when all 7 Chaos Emeralds were collected. Shadow had now seen this plan through, and believes his promise to Maria has been fulfilled. All he had left to do now is sit back and wait for the end. After seeing his closest friend murdered before his eyes for no reason, Shadow became completely disenfranchised with mankind. The planet he once dreamed of visiting with Maria had betrayed him, poisoning him against it completely. It was only right they paid for what they did, and this was all that fueled him throughout this entire game. And he is now ready to burn along with the planet. After all, with Maria gone, what did he have left to live for? But see, like Sonic Adventure, Amy is involved in one of the most important plot moments for another character. She makes her case for humanity with Shadow, saying while some can be selfish, most are essentially good. And as she begs him to help, her words awaken in him his true memories of Maria's final moments. She never wanted revenge. She wanted Shadow to be a force for good in the world, reminding him that this was the purpose of his creation. And that's all it took. No longer tainted by false memories implanted by Gerald, Shadow immediately rushes into the fray to set right his many wrongs, stepping in front of the Bio-Lizard to give Sonic and Knuckles the time they need to neutralize the Chaos Emeralds. And when one beating isn't enough, he and Sonic team up in their super forms for a final showdown with the creature in space. That's right, Shadow has a super form and it's gorgeous. But even with the creature defeated, the Ark is still falling towards Earth. So taking no chances, just to ensure he and Sonic have enough energy to warp it to safety, he removes an inhibitor ring in order to boost the power of his chaos control, using up all of his remaining energy and preventing him from making it back to the space colony. And reciting his promise to Maria one last time.
Maria, this is what you wanted, right? This is my promise I made to you.
He falls to Earth, disappearing in a flash of light. Shadow selflessly sacrificed his own life just to keep his promise to Maria, saving the people she wanted so much to meet and the planet she dreamed of visiting with him one day, putting right the many wrongs he had committed. And this is the real Shadow, not the one blinded by false memories or revenge, and certainly not the shallow edgelord he would later become. Shadow saved humanity, even though all humanity had ever done was take everything away from him. Just because that's what Maria had wanted. He's a loyal friend and a true hero, and this will always be the Shadow I measure all future depictions of the character against. Thematically, Shadow added elements to the series we'd never seen before. Sure, we've gotten revenge and betrayal, maybe even a bit of grief if you count the angry H2O lizard who missed his Chow friends. But Sonic Adventure 2, and more specifically Shadow's story arc, ramped all of these up to 11. Betrayal? Shadow was betrayed by humanity, a species that created him for their own benefit, only to end up fearing their own creation. And he would then go on to use and betray Eggman. Revenge? The insight we get into Shadow's psyche, and the fact we actually get to see his past and how everything played out for him, makes this infinitely more engaging than any revenge story we'd seen before. And grief? Getting to experience Shadow's grief firsthand successfully turned him into one of the best sympathetic characters this series has ever seen, and how he coped with it at times was really heartbreaking. And while a lot of it was dialed back to save time and keep the game's child-friendly rating, there's still a lot of dark shit in this game when you actually stop to think about it. Genetic monsters, the extinction of humanity, murder, government cover-ups, terminal illness. Maria's disease, known as NIDS or neuroimmunodeficiency syndrome, was pretty much the reason for Shadow's existence, and the only reason Gerald agreed to work on the project in the first place, hoping to discover a cure for her in the process. A shamefully underutilized part of the plot, but there's a sick irony in the fact that Maria was the person he was created to help, fittingly the person he cared about most, but was the one person Shadow couldn't save in the end. And it was these darker, more complex themes that Shadow helped introduce to the series, going on to influence some of the better stories in the years that followed. Shadow grew so much in such a short space of time in this game, and based on what he grew into and the tremendous pain we watched him overcome, it's absolutely no surprise to me that people just weren't ready to say goodbye to him yet. It was one hell of a redemption arc, a story that will always be one of my favorite in the series, and the harmony his sacrifice brought about on both sides through the shared sorrow of his loss made for one of the most remarkable moments in the entire series, seeing both sides of this conflict coexisting peacefully. Eggman casually chatting with Tails about his grandfather. At the time, I truly wondered how the series could pull back from this. It was a picture I just would have never been able to imagine before. A truly special moment. Shadow the Hedgehog was a true hero, or better still, an imperfect and relatable hero. After honorably sacrificing his life in Adventure 2, and totally stealing the show in the end, Sonic Team pulled a drastic U-turn and revived Shadow for the follow-up Sonic Heroes. The narrative complexity of Heroes was dialed back considerably compared to the Adventure titles, a somewhat fresh start with the series now gone fully multi-platform. But despite this simpler, newcomer-friendly story, I still think it managed getting Shadow's character right. Suffering from amnesia, Shadow can't remember anything about his past, not even the events of his debut game. So to find the answers he seeks, he has no choice but to team up with Rouge and Omega to find Eggman, whose basement lab he'd been locked away in. But despite the somewhat convenient amnesia angle, glimpses of Shadow's real character still shine through all throughout the game. Instinctually saving Rouge the moment he wakes, his slumbering competitive nature when confronted by Sonic, and he's still successfully kept as a sympathetic character when we see him struggle with the possibility that he's actually just an android copy of the real Shadow. But even back before that question was ever answered, I was 100% certain this was the real Shadow. He was just too perfect to be a copy, making peace with his existence no matter what that entailed.
Still the ultimate life form, Shadow the Hedgehog.
And going on to buy Team Sonic the time they needed when the true villain of the game reveals itself. And watching this guy fumble around in the dark with no memories to anchor his morality either way, yet still end up doing the right thing, was really endearing. Sure, the logistics around his return and where his character might be going are diluted somewhat by the many other new and returning characters. It really could have used its own game, huh? I mean, there's no way that would be a mistake. But regardless of what would ultimately happen to his character going forward, this will always be the game that formed Team Dark. And I don't think we'll ever see a better team of misfits work quite so well together in this series again. When it comes to Shadow's spin-off game, I honestly feel like I'm forever on the fence about it. On the one hand, we have a game that attempts to add some serious depth to Shadow's origins, giving us a lot of background on how Shadow actually came to be. On paper, I couldn't be any more down with that. And on the other, we have a really messy story with branching moral decisions that frankly can pretty much break Shadow as a character. This game once again sees him questioning his past and haunted by visions of Maria's death. Yep, despite the fact we covered both of these issues in Sonic Adventure 2 and Heroes, we have to watch his character needlessly regress so we can do it all over again. Doesn't matter that he made peace with not knowing about his origins at the end of Heroes, or that he could have just read the Sonic Adventure 2 Wikipedia page to get up to speed. This game once again sees him plot around seeking answers. Caught in the middle of a three-way war between Gun, Eggman and the Black Arms, Shadow now has to choose a side and gather the 7 Chaos Emeralds to get the answers he seeks. His amnesia being abused by Eggman and Black Doom in an attempt to manipulate him into doing their bidding. And while this game does create some cool new pieces of lore, like Shadow being created using DNA from Black Doom, and that the purpose of his existence was to cure fatal illnesses, the character regression and needless rethreading of old ground just doesn't justify this story's existence. Not for me anyway. The writing just went way overboard with the try-hard dialogue, dismissive personality, and tough guy nonsense. I mean, I know they were desperately trying to give the game some sort of edge, what with the insanely mature 10 and up rating they aspired to, but moments like these are among the many that just make Shadow seem like a complete knockoff of himself in this game.
A Chaos Emerald? You've gotta be kidding me, guys. This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
Shadow, why are you siding with those black creatures?
Siding with them? You're joking, right? I'm just siding with whoever goes up against you. This time you're going down, Sonic. I'm Shadow the Hedgehog, and now I am the most powerful hedgehog in the world. The power of these emeralds makes me invincible. I am the ultimate hedgehog. This is who I am.
He seems to remember Tails when he sees him, so that means he at the very least remembers the events of Heroes. Yet, when he beats Sonic, he stands over him cackling like the corniest supervillain imaginable, saying how he would side with anyone who's against him. It's just complete nonsense, and doesn't line up at all with his established character up to this point. Yeah, most of the offending dialogue is sprinkled throughout the non-canon story branches, but that makes them all the more confusing and inconsequential, only serving to make me wonder why they even bothered with them in the first place. The one very important revelation in this game, though, is an obscure one tucked deep into the final boss encounter, when Eggman finally reveals to Shadow that he is in fact the original, putting to bed our collective worries that he was just an android copy. The canon ending sees him make peace with his origins, as well as his connections to Black Doom and the death of Maria, choosing to put the past behind him and move on. Which, for me, ultimately begs the question, what was the point of this game? In terms of progression, he's right back where he was at the end of Heroes. Granted, now he knows he's the real deal, but he had made peace with that already either way. My biggest issue with Shadow's portrayal in this game was that the branching story added absolutely nothing besides complete confusion about what his character is. Most branches portray him as an uncaring tryhard, and that just is not Shadow's character. And it's unfortunate that this game is likely the dominant reference material for most of his more recent appearances. But for me, at that time, this game was simply a blip for Shadow. A bump in the road before something so much better. And if it did even one thing right, it was set Shadow up nicely for what came next. Sonic 06? You know the one. That game everyone says nearly buried the series. Shadow is awesome in this game. After the events of his own game, 06 sees him become an agent of Gun, working together with Rouge and Omega to keep humanity and the planet safe. And this in and of itself represents huge growth for Shadow. He's now working for the organization that took away everything he ever cared about, because he knows it's the best way to help humanity, the very thing he promised Maria he would do, without clashing with them in the process. And he gets to spend his days fighting evil with his Team Dark buddies. Hey, shut up. They are too still a thing.
I'm not mad, you're mad.
But I just love the fact that the bond between these three is so strong in this game. Shadow seems genuinely concerned and distressed at the idea of leaving a deactivated Omega behind in the future, and jumps straight into action to save Rouge, even though doing so unleashes Mephiles. And he seems really hurt at the idea that it would be Omega that apprehends him when humanity turns on him. Not only hurt that humanity would turn on him after everything he's done for them, or just because it would be Omega, his friend, that would take him down, but also because once again humanity's fear of him would come back to haunt him. The very same fear that took Maria from him. There's lots of emotional layers to Shadow's story in this game, or in any game where he's done well, to be honest, and I always love it when he brings that added emotional depth to the narrative. And it was nice to see when his camaraderie with Team Dark would help keep him strong when things were at their hardest for him, with Rouge's touching promise to stick by him no matter what, and both Rouge and Omega supporting him during his amnesia. As a result, Shadow grew into a relatable and, most importantly, a likable hero, even stepping into the fray against Silver unprompted just to help Sonic. Sega can try and tell us that Team Dark isn't a thing, and that Shadow is just a surly lone wolf now, but the games that did his character best always contradict this. In the past, Shadow was often susceptible to manipulation due to his amnesia. Eggman, Neo Metal, Black Doom, many have abused this weakness at one time or another. But in 06, this trend is truly broken. Shadow knows who he is now. There's a whole song about it. And Mephiles completely fails to deviate him even slightly from his beliefs. He is steadfastly loyal to those he cares about, willing to put his own life on the line to help the few he holds in that small circle, and will do the same in a heartbeat to keep his promise to Maria. But even as guardian of humanity, Shadow is by no means their slave, finishing out his story with one of my favorite lines for him in the whole series.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
In the years that followed 06, things would start to change, and change drastically at that for Shadow. His place in the series more aimless and precarious than ever. See, for all the failings of 06, and there were many, Shadow simply wasn't one of them. But that didn't stop him and the rest of Sonic's friends being cast to one side, as Sonic teams shifted their focus to Sonic exclusively in most future games, switching up Shadow's role as a narrative heavyweight to being pretty much inconsequential. Between 06 and Forces, Shadow is probably best known for his appearances in the Boom titles. And look, I appreciate that some of you guys can see this for what it is, a self-contained alternate universe with no bearing on the mainline series, but I'm sorry, it's easy to turn around and stress it's an alternate universe and non-canon after the whole thing crashed and burned. Yeah, sure, that was our plan all along, but had that whole thing taken off, you can bet your ass that shit would be canon. And when you consider how this was pretty much the only exposure the character had for the longest time, and how badly it tarnished his reputation, it's just salt in the wounds for anyone who enjoyed the more nuanced and narratively rich original take on the character. Gon is the strong silent type, a deep intellectual who had been on a journey of redemption and self-discovery. Gon is a Shadow who learned how to care again through suffering and grief. Basically, Gon is anything about him that had any poise. That strong presence he added to any scene he appeared in. Maria, Team Dark, all the things that helped shape the character into who he was, one of the most successful and beloved characters in the series I might add, was unceremoniously thrown out the window, just in order to squirt out this fuck-awful Vegeta ripoff.
Not a great time, Shadow. I'm a little busy saving the world.
Saving the world? You? Don't make me laugh. You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends. You're not going through that portal. I'm gonna show you just how weak you are.
We beat Lyric together as a team.
And I'm leaving alone as your superior.
Look, I know people get upset when Shadow is boiled down to just a Vegeta clone, and trust me, of all people, I understand this. In Sonic Adventure 2, Heroes, and 06, that simply wasn't the case. He couldn't have been further from a Vegeta clone in those games. But I'm sorry, rarely is there smoke without fire, because in pretty much every game he appears in after 06, he is just a terrible Vegeta clone. Worse yet, an early Vegeta clone. His IDW outing suffered at the hands of this, and please don't scream mandates at me. Don't worry, I know. But when it comes to Boom in particular, I don't even really know what to say about it. All humanity and charm has been completely removed, and all we're really left with is this corny, angsty tool, a cringeworthy tryhard. And it's just painful to watch him become so shallow and boring after all the great moments he's given us in the past. It's just such a waste. And while things did improve slightly for Shadow and Forces, I mean Jesus, compared to Boom that isn't hard, but he still isn't right by a long shot. His Vegeta-isms are still very much present.
I'm more than enough on my own. I'll handle things my way.
And he seems to uncharacteristically revel in conflict. Shadow was never really portrayed as unnecessarily violent, and by that I mean he never seemed to actively enjoy conflict. More often than not, it was simply a means to an end for him. He was never a big blowhard about it. I mean, it sucks to be you guys, bye-bye planet. Beyond seeming to enjoy his rivalry with Sonic, he usually preferred to speak with his actions rather than his words, doing only what was needed to succeed. But here, he goes overkill and babbles pointless insults after beating him. This just feels wrong. This isn't the Shadow me and many others grew up enjoying, and I honestly don't think this is the vision Shiro Miyakawa had in mind when he wrote the character in the first place. Shadow wasn't a bully. Early Vegeta was often a bully. Shadow wasn't a try-hard sad act who bored his opponents to death with trash talk. Early Vegeta, yeah. I've seen people try and counter this way of thinking by saying things like, so what, Shadow can never do or say anything bad? He always has to be a good little boy boo-hooing
Maria!
while hugging his knees and rocking back and forth? No. Nobody ever said that. This type of thing would be absolutely fine if this wasn't all his character is now. It's the fact that this type of thing is all the series ever really craps out for him anymore that has people like me missing the original take on his character so much. And I'm sorry if this is the only Shadow you know. If this is the Shadow you grew up with and you're perfectly fine with it, the last thing I want to do is make anyone feel bad for liking something. That's not what this video is about. But I hope that even if you are one of those people, that if nothing else, maybe this video has given you some perspective on why us old-timers can be so touchy when it comes to this character. Shadow had an amazing redemption arc in Sonic Adventure 2, going on to own all of his emotional baggage and become a force for good in the world, just like he had promised Maria. And moving on to Team Dark, then allowed his character to be tied to something else, giving him an opportunity to redefine himself and move on from his grief, all while giving us some of the most entertaining and wholesome interactions and stories. But for whatever reason, that character growth and progression wasn't deemed worth keeping, leaving Shadow to become little more than a self-aware meme, an all-encompassing edgelord parody of all the negative perceptions of his character. Shadow was better when he had some fucking dignity. Written best when he would say very little, because then what he did say would always feel more impactful. It never felt like he was trying to be tough or cool. His presence and delivery just naturally added that. Now he just talks too much, and the words that squirt out of his face are mostly Cringetown, seeming to take great pleasure in being an ass for no reason. The series' bogeyman, the dreaded mandates, would seem to indicate this is very much an intentional thing, and really, I guess that's what worries me more than anything. I'm worried that this might be all the character will ever be from now on, and I'm worried that movie Shadow will conform to this same ideology. It's funny because the purpose of the mandates is most likely to protect Shadow's character, but for a great many people, all they're really doing is cementing the very worst version of him in the history books. As for who exactly this version of the character is aimed at, I'm really not sure. I ran a poll on the channel asking you guys which version of Shadow you liked best, and I mean, based on the data I'm seeing, the age ranges are nicely covered here, and I still don't really know who modern Shadow is supposed to appeal to. A minority, seemingly. And I'd like to stress again, if this was the take you grew up with, if this is the take you prefer, that's totally fine. This is just me spouting my opinions and caring far more than any grown man probably should about a take on a 20-year-old Sonic character. But hey, it is what it is. Shadow was awesome because he was one of the most realistic characters in the games, and as such he isn't always purely good or bad. He lives in the grey that us mere mortals inhabit every day, motivated by love and caring for those who are important to him. If someone took away someone you loved, you would seek to avenge them, right? Good people often do terrible things for the right reasons, and it's this inherently human perception of personal justice, a concept that lives completely within the grey, that Shadow uniquely portrayed better than anyone else in the series. Sonic, he's impossibly good, pure hero chow. Shadow is flawed, realistic, relatable. Even when told humans would turn on him in 06, he outright admitted he wouldn't surrender. He would fight like he always has. But until then, he would continue to do the right thing and protect the planet. It's this Shadow that I'd love to see return in a future game. It's this Shadow that Paramount needs to draw from in the third movie. And it's this Shadow that will always represent the true version of his character for me. But there's a good likelihood I've probably rambled on enough. Now, I'm very eager to hear what you guys think. Which version of Shadow is the true Shadow to you? What are some of your favorite or most memorable moments for the character? And how would you like to see him portrayed going forward? Be that in future games or the third movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you, for whatever reason, find yourself vibing with my content and want to help support the channel, there are numerous ways you guys can help me out. Things as simple as liking and subscribing are huge. You can also join the channel Discord server or follow me on Twitter. Links to all of those are in the description. And for those of you who want to go a bit further, you can do a super thanks on my videos. Yep, that's a thing apparently. Or head over to my Patreon and become a supporter. There's multiple tiers and benefits on there, starting for as little as $1. And look, there's zero pressure or expectations on my part. Any and all support in all forms is appreciated. The dream is to be able to make this whole content creator thing a viable living, as that would allow me to spend much more time creating videos for you guys, and cut down on those pesky gaps that can sometimes happen. But anyway, you're probably all saying to yourselves about now, that sounds like a you problem, Mark. And you're totally right. A big thank you for watching. And as always guys, take care.